Welcome to today's webinar, Food Waste Funding Trends, Insights from the ReFED Capital Tracker. We are so excited to be sharing this with you today. Now, for those of you who joined us at the 2022 Food Waste Solutions Summit earlier in May in Minneapolis, whether in person or virtually, you of course got a special preview of this capital tracker. But during today's event, we're really going to be diving in to show you what this tool is all about and all the potential that we believe it holds to really help critically important stakeholders in the fight against food waste better understand how they can best help to scale food waste solutions using the ever important lever of capital. Now, I see quite a few names on the line that I'm familiar with, but there's also many new ones that I haven't met yet. So for those of you who I haven't met, my name is Alexandria Corey, and I am the VP of Capital, Innovation, and Engagement at ReFED. As many of you know, ReFED is, of course, a national nonprofit that is working to end food loss and waste across the U.S. food system by advancing data-driven solutions and by mobilizing smart capital. And today's webinar is hosted by the Food Waste Funder Circle, which is one of the resources that ReFED launched along with our partners at the Upcycled Food Association to provide private, public, and philanthropic funders with a curated platform for food waste-focused education, collaboration, and investment. So we'll put a link in the chat box right now for anyone who might be interested in learning more about the Funder Circle. But beyond the Food Waste Funder Circle, as one of these dedicated resources to help mobilize more smart capital into the sector, it's an absolute pleasure today to be launching with you all this additional resource, which is this brand new public and free tool that we've named the ReFED Capital Tracker. So now between you and me, I can say that 100% this tool has been a true labor of love over the past 2+ years, and it's now ready to share with all of you and hopefully help to build a more comprehensive picture of funding in the food waste reduction space. Now, since ReFED first launched, we've been able to really quantify the amount of funding that was needed and how much was actually going into the sector to support and scale the adoption of food waste solutions. We knew that was really critical and important for us to do as an organization. We've systematically worked to bring light to the problem of food waste through the development and dissemination of data and insights, ultimately helping to catalyze capital and scale innovation and making the stakeholders that we know need to take certain actions, hopefully take those actions. So for a little bit of context for how this capital tracker relates more broadly to the other resources that we have, last year, many of you will know that we launched the ReFED Insights Engine. The Insights Engine is this online knowledge hub that really offers a centralized source of data and solutions for fighting food waste. Some of the tools in that include our Food Waste Monitor, which details and quantifies the problem of food waste. We have a solutions database, which models the impact potential of more than 40 solutions. We have a solution provider directory, which identifies more than 1,000 solution providers that are working on the front lines as we speak. And of course, they need more capital to scale their work. We have an impact calculator, which allows organizations to quantify the food waste diversion, greenhouse gas emissions reductions, meals rescued, and water savings that occurred due to changes in their own food waste practices. We have a policy tracker, which describes the enabling and not so enabling sometimes policy environments for food waste solutions. And now there is this capital tracker, which provides insights into the investment landscape for food waste solutions. And what I personally find so exciting and powerful about this ReFED Food Waste Capital Tracker is that it is truly a first of its kind tool that tracks and analyzes data on food waste financing so that capital providers or solution providers alike can derive insights, they can make key decisions, and they can develop funding strategies that are informed by as close to real-time data as is currently available out there. And as with many ReFED tools, it's intended to be living and breathing, something that adjusts with the rapidly changing landscape that we're working in. So definitely please share your feedback, whether today on this call or after this call as you start to use the tool. The purpose is really to help you take action to address this pressing national and international issue that we have. So if there are changes that would help you, take action more easily, we want to hear about that. And I'm sure as we go through the tool, you'll have questions. So again, please do share that in the chat. We will try to get to as many as we can. And then ultimately, at the end of this call, we're going to be sharing a link to office hours. So this would be one-on-one dedicated time for you to connect with the ReFED team to really think about how this new tool could be useful for you. So with that, I'm going to stop talking for a minute, and I'm really excited to introduce my colleague Alejandro Enamorado, who has been and continues to be ReFED's capital tracker guru. Alejandro has truly guided this tool to this stage. He's lived very deep in the funding data in the process, which makes him really the perfect person to first share the insights that he's gleaned from the process of analyzing this data. Two, he's going to take us through a demo of the tool. And then third, he's going to walk us through some live user journeys with two very special guests that we have with you today, and I'm very excited about. So with that, Alejandro, I will pass the mic over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. And hello, everybody. Although we're really excited to show you the capital tracker tool, and I know we're kind of teasing it right now, the core of why we built it is to help us understand what has been going on in the food waste funding space so that we can push it forward. So before I jump into any numbers brought to you by the tool, I want to say a word about the data that currently informs it. The beta version of the capital tracker that we are launching today includes private investment data from one source, which is from our data partner, Pitchbook. Therefore, what we're able to discuss today in our insights and in the tool when it comes to trends is going to be private capital. That covers venture capital, private equity, and a portion of corporate finance and spending through mergers and acquisitions and some debt transactions. And so as a result, we do think and we do expect that the food waste private investment is going to be magnitudes larger than what we have here. And looking beyond private investment data, we are in the midst of building our philanthropic data reported through IRS Form 990s and federal government spending via usaspending.gov. So despite this not fully capturing everything, 100% of what's going on, we believe that this is the most complete view of what is going on in the food waste space right now that you can get in one place. And so you'll see a version of this chart that's about to show up in a couple minutes. But what you see in front of you is the story of private investment in for US food waste over the last 10 years. So you can see in the early 2010s, when ReFED was just an idea, the thesis was that there were not many food waste solution providers out there. And I think one thing that we really saw like back then was that there was mostly, I would say, just food rescue organizations, as well as very large food processors that were very efficient at their waste streams. But moving forward, now we're seeing private food waste investment has been increasing steadily over the last 10 years. And we believe that the inflection point was reached in 2016. At that point, more deals were coming into the space and money was going into far different and a wider set of solution categories. Interestingly enough, ReFED released its first roadmap to reducing food waste around that time. Coincidence, yes, but we also like to think that that was also something that helped really push the sector forward. And although when you see this chart, the journey appears a little choppy at first glance in the chart, one thing to know is that there were 3 extraordinary transactions that took place in 2013, 2015, and 2018. When you normalize for these, you'll end up actually seeing a more gradual story that's a little more linear when it comes to the growth that has been experienced in the food waste sector. And so in 2013, there was an acquisition by Darling. They acquired a rendering firm. In 2015, there was AgroFresh's reverse merger. And in 2018, Kroger acquired Home Chef. All of these were around the $600 million to $700 million size. So when you strip those out, those years are actually far lower than what you see right there. Moving forward, private investment has now reached an unprecedented level of $2 billion for 2021. And this is really where I want to really focus on because this is what's going on currently. This excites us because funding can be viewed as a proxy or leading indicator for adoption. So when you look at the chart here from that lens, you can see that progress really is being made for food waste solutions. But ReFED's view is still that there is plenty of opportunity for investment given our modeling estimates that 14 billion of investment is needed annually to reduce food waste by 50%. You can see right there, we've got a few growth figures to show you. The main thing is like over the past 2 years, we've seen an average growth rate of approximately 110% in terms of investment that's going into the space. And this is due to larger deals becoming more and more frequent. If you look back in the 2010s, average deal size was around 2 to 5 million. And now we're seeing it closer to 17 million in 2021. as solution providers have gained more traction, investor interest, and I would say roughly we are seeing a little bit of a maturation in the space. And there are a number of reasons to explain this overall growth in the sector. I think our view is that similar to other emerging investment categories like alternative protein, food waste really is coming on its own. And from that inflection point that we talked about, we are now seeing funders recognize the environmental, economic, and social benefits of fighting food waste. And then looking more closely at 2020 onwards, we are seeing that there's a lot more evidence of food waste having established itself as an investable sector. There are so many case studies now that you can point to where companies are raising larger rounds, and as well as being able to tell that story of the impact that they're having. But to put all this in another way, many funders are now making that connection between climate and food waste, which has driven sustainability focused dollars into the issue. I also don't want to look at these dollar amounts here within a vacuum. When looking at private capital broadly, the most active year in recent memory was also 2021. And so that's just because there has been a lot of capital available in these more later years. So in the food waste space, one thing to talk about is a majority of private capital has been going towards prevention solutions. And those are designed to keep loss and waste from occurring in the first place. Capital has concentrated in specific solutions that have been able to demonstrate that in return on investment and traction. So you can see on the left of your screen, these are the solutions that have been getting most of the historical attention. So I would call it, when you see edible coatings and intelligent packaging, that's more of your shelf life extension products. And then we've also been seeing a lot of attention paid to imperfect produce channels as well as meal kits. Recycling has been a constant in that too, and I'll talk a bit more about that. But in the past, it's been mostly focused on composting as well as anaerobic digestion and some value-added conversion. What we're seeing now, though, are sort of emerging categories that are now experiencing a lot more like increasing funding rounds. So we've got categories such as enhanced demand planning, markdown and sharing, applications which are now really getting traction with consumers. And upcycling, although remains a little nascent, is a space that is up and coming as well. And in that story, recycling is also consistent, although more so on the conversion of waste streams into biomaterials. So in the case that we show below, that is the conversion of waste feedstock to animal feed. Now, to see how this looks on a more quantitative basis, I've got this slide for you here. The top 5 categories over the last 10 years have had a lot of investment concentrated into them, and you can see that from the slide here. If you look at this from, I would say, the last 3 years, you will see that enhanced demand planning will be starting to join that top 5. And now I would like to share with you how we've been able to get these insights through the Capital Tracker tool. Perfect. Hopefully everybody can see this. So basically, the spirit of the Capital Tracker was to allow users to be able to explore the activity that has been going on in the food waste space. So to enter the tool, you have a few options to do that. First, you can either look all the way down here, and this is the home page. You can either click this arrow here or use the left toolbar to be able to look at the tool itself. So let me click into the Capital Tracker here. Perfect. So right now you can see that the Capital Tracker is built with 3 views in mind. First, and probably the most straightforward, is the overtime chart, or what we like to call the bar chart format. If you hover over each of these bars, you're able to see details. For instance, like 2017, we've got the breakdowns of prevention, rescue, recycling, general, of the dollar amounts that have been involved in the space. We also have different views to see what type of capital has made up the investment. So if I click on capital type, you'll be able to see the bars right here. As you can tell, we only have private capital in here right now. And that's because when we're launching with the Pitchbook data, it's going to be mostly private investment. So that explains why there's a small number of, I would say, like philanthropic and public. That's because there's a few transactions that show up in our Pitchbook data set that show up there. And so going back to this bar chart here, I was able to use the bar chart to tell that food waste story and using the high-level categories of prevention, rescue, and recycling to talk about it as well. So as I noted, you'll see the bar charts are a little choppy. So that information that I mentioned at during my insights, you can see right here. The footnote here outlines sort of the extraordinary transactions that took place so that you can factor it in when you're looking at the bar chart. So before I move on to this, you'll notice that we've got a checkbox here, which is called Include Indirect. We at ReFED here know that there's certain solutions that can partially reduce food waste, so it doesn't necessarily make sense to attribute 100% of that investment into them as a pure food waste solution. And so there are certain examples that live in there. One example would be, we know that there's food rescue that does purely do food rescue and saves food, but I would say maybe like an extreme example would be thinking about food rescue that does a majority of purchasing food, or in which case that would be factored in indirect. So I'm going to click that right now. And so you'll be able to see the bar chart with indirect figures in there. One thing also to note is that another thing that really makes up a large portion of the indirect is cold chain investment. And so that is building out the facilities, acquiring facilities and whatnot. We're also including that into indirect because of the sheer size of it. It actually makes up a large majority of the indirect investment that is right now here. So that would have skewed the data. And additionally, we don't have it as a modeled solution within ReFED's hierarchy. So before I move on from this screen, I want to show you what is on the left here. So basically, we've built a filter function so that you can use it to drill down deeper in the data. So I can click into solution type, capital type, investment amount, legal status. So if you want to look into for-profit and nonprofit, you can use that as well. For the purposes of this demo, I'm just going to click prevention and apply it. And so you can see that you can narrow down the data using the filter. And then I'm just going to clear that filter for the audience here. So I've really focused on the bar chart, but there's a few other views that I want to show the audience here today. So the first is going to be what we call the concentration chart. ReFED, here at ReFED, we're pretty proud of this, I would say, because it's a little flashy. But I think what I like about this chart is the fact that it's really helpful for people to help visualize what is going on in the space. And so you can see from here, these are all the individual investments that have taken place over the past 10 years, just graphically outputted on the screen. And so you can just hover over each of these bubbles and you can see the individual investment and how much they received. And you'll see we've got an axis here, and that's just to indicate the size of the investment. When I click over to recipients, so just give it a little bit of time to load, but this view is going to be aggregating all those dots into like an individual solution provider basis. And so what you'll end up seeing is the ones that are all the way to the right are where capital has really concentrated in on. And so if I hover over here, you'll see Misfits Market. And this is what I use to help inform my insights when it came to where capital really concentrated over the past 10 years. So Misfits Market, which is a imperfect produce channel. You'll see Appeal, edible coatings, for instance, is here. So that's what's pretty interesting about this viewpoint. I'm not going to show it quickly now, but within each of these dots, you'll see this view recipient. If you click into that, you're able to get more detail about said company or said funder. And so if I click over to the funders view, you're going to see a similar sort of concentration chart, but that'll be from the basis of who's been investing in the space. And our goal is that we've aggregated the dots that they were involved in, and that it's being shown here. What's pretty interesting as well is if I click into deal count, what will show up is this is what we're showing here is going to be like individual bubbles will show what deals the company was involved in, or the amount of deals. And so this is a good way to look at the activity that's been going on in the space. And so for those that are more interested in the, I would say, the more granular data, I'm going to move over to the list view, which provides, I would say, like all the information that you can find in the bar chart and the concentration chart, but like within individual records. So you'll see right now, this is just all the investments that have occurred in the food waste space for the past 10 years. It's right now ordered by recency, and you can reorder it by a number of categories if you want to do it by size or alphabetical. Things to show you here is that let's say in this individual deal, you're able to see the funders that were involved in that, some descriptions, as well as how ReFED is classifying that deal in our nomenclature. We also know that it's kind of tough to get your head around like the various names of what solutions are called. So we also include fact sheets here for people to look in for reference. And then we've got some individual deal details to the right. I'll just show you briefly that the list view also has a view for recipients. And so you can see on the recipients level, again, like looking at individual solution providers that have gotten capital, and then the deals that they've been involved in. I'm going to pause a little bit so you can actually look at this. And then next, I'm going to move over to funders. And so in that viewpoint, you can see the individual funders that have been involved in food waste. And as well, you can see the deal count, so the number of deals that they've been involved in and dollar deals involved in. I'm going to pause right here because I know this dollar deals involved in is a little confusing. So this is because when it comes to the Pitchbook data source, it does not break down the individual investor contributions for venture deals. So for deals where there are multiple investors involved, but we only know the total deal count, we won't know the amount each investor has contributed. So this is our best effort to show how active an investor is. But if you really want true activity, I would just recommend looking at deal count for your perspective. And we're probably going to go a little deeper into this once we have our guests, but within each of these, you're also able to click and get into profiles. So right now you can see this is a funder profile that we have, and we've developed it for this tool. Separately, as part of like the solution provider directory, but part of this tool, we've integrated the two together. And so if I go into recipients, I'll be able to click into, let's say, a profile, and it'll show you the solution provider profile with some additional details in it. So we've got impact as well as you've got the deals that they've received. And so I imagine a lot of people will have questions. We're hoping to answer them, I would say, like within a document after the call. If you're like interested in what is being included in the capital tracker, what's being tracked, we have a methodology document, which you can find on the right of the screen here. And then separately, we are open to feedback. This is a beta. So if you think a deal is missing, if you think functionality would help you with the tool, we are open and we would love to hear from you. And you can get that feedback by filling out our feedback form that you can click into here. And so that we can help with the next iteration to get this even better. So thank you all. And so with that, I'm going to stop. And I'm going to introduce the guests that we're going to be having today who are deeply knowledgeable about the food waste space and who have kindly provided feedback along the way as we've developed the capital tracker. And they conveniently represent two different perspectives, one a capital provider and one a solution provider. And so we've invited them to participate in a demo today to illustrate how both funders and innovators might use it. And so right now on the screen, I would first love to introduce to you Sarah Vered, who is currently a principal at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, but is here as the co-founder of ReFED through her initial work to deploy impact capital to solve environmental problems. So, hello, Sarah.
Hi, Alejandro. So happy to be here.
Awesome. So before we get into the capital tracker user journey, I would like to take a step back and ask you to reflect for a minute on why tracking capital into food waste reduction work was important to you back in the early days of ReFED's founding, and then maybe understand how you might find it useful today as a funder.
Sure. I can definitely do that. I think maybe before even starting though, just to say this is so awesome. And I've been loving watching the chats where everyone's talking about how amazing this tool is. And I know, Alex mentioned at the beginning, but it is certainly a labor of love, I think, that you guys have put into this to pull this together, and so informative and just very, very cool to see. So I'm thrilled to be here and be able to share a bit about actually back kind of in the 2016 timeframe, some of the things we were thinking about. But the way it's been brought to life, I think, surpasses any and all expectations that I possibly could have even envisioned or imagined at that time. But when we were first founding ReFED, the key impetus behind the roadmap that was published in 2016 was really around understanding kind of what the solutions were to reduce food waste and loss, and what resources were really needed to scale those solutions. At the highest level, the problem of food waste was known, although, as you know, and as you continue to do work on at the more granular level, there's still a lot of questions around different waste streams and drivers. But at the highest level, the problem was known. What wasn't really widespread knowledge at the time was what were the solutions and what would be needed to scale those solutions, including the estimated financial resources. As part of the 2016 roadmap, we took a stab, our kind of best estimate at what those resources might need to be, but really didn't have a sense at the time for what the baseline was. So there were really a few different drivers behind the initial thinking for tracking food waste funding. First was really just to be able to understand kind of where we are today, where are the gaps, and what are the additional resources that are going to be needed. We knew at the time that significantly more resources were going to be needed to solve food waste of all different types of financial resources. I think second is that in addition to being able to understand where the gaps are, tracking and categorizing something like food waste transactions helps to really give a sense of meaning and scale and trends and things like that. It's a way for people, myself included, to grasp and to understand a concept or a trend. And in 2014, when actually the initial idea behind ReFED was starting, so 2 years before the roadmap was actually launched, I could probably count on in both my hands the number of for-profit companies that were in this space outside of the recycling sector. And to see how that number has exploded over the years, tracked through ReFED Solutions database, has really helped to put a spotlight on the innovators and the entrepreneurs who are tackling this problem and can bring more national attention and awareness to it, and more funders as well. It's kind of a flywheel effect of, as more activity is happening, there's more interest in funding that activity as outcomes are starting to be seen and whatnot. And Alex, actually at the beginning, you mentioned earlier that there's over 1,000 solutions providers now in the database, which is just amazing. And I didn't actually know that the number was that high at this point. So that's super cool to see and to hear. And then finally, I think kind of the third driver behind the initial thinking for this was that a few years ago, when we first started to look at who was active in this space, there was a relatively small number of individuals who were saying, I'm interested in, I'm funding food waste. But as we started to look at the transactions that were happening, both philanthropic and private funding, I remember being really surprised just that there were far more people, far more foundations, individuals, funders, et cetera, that were in the space than we had previously thought. And it helped to highlight just the range of different motivations and reasons why somebody was contributing to the topic. And also help to highlight just the number of new partners that could potentially be kind of allies in this fight against food waste. Similarly, with this capital tracker, there's some investors who I've seen in the news and wasn't surprised about, but as I was digging in, there were many that were surprised. So it's great to see the number of organizations that are active and use it as a way to find potential partners. So just to kind of wrap up this, kind of trip down memory lane in terms of 2014, 2016 timeframe, how we were thinking about things. I think, we use data and numbers to give meaning to so many things in our lives, from the simple tracking. Actually, my son just this morning was saying, I have, 3 days of school left before summer, to things, far more complex, from COVID numbers, annual greenhouse gas emissions, to a lot of the data on food waste that ReFED's been tracking. And by tracking something, you're really able to give meaning to it and order to it. And it's just amazing to see how the capital tracker has come to life in this way, in a way that's really helping to bring a spotlight onto this opportunity, and how much momentum has been happening in the space.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's truly a privilege to have you here today to share some of ReFED's origin story. And so now I would like to invite you to take a journey with me through the capital tracker. So I'm going to share my screen quickly. And so Sarah, hopefully everybody can see, I would like to ask you how you first used the tool.
Sure. So in my role today at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, I'm looking generally at kind of for-profit investments in companies that are aligned with the areas that we focus on, and increasingly have been starting to look at things in the climate space. And so we generally on my team are looking for investments kind of in the Series B and C stage, and often things that are technology enabled, often many kind of software solutions, things like that. So when I was looking through this tool, first filtered to focus on kind of venture capital and private equity. And then I filtered to focus on prevention solutions, knowing that while there's tech across prevention, recovery, and recycling. Prevention in particular happens to often have kind of a profile that fits well for investment from a kind of Series B and C stage perspective, and often tends to be tech enabled. And so I kind of filtered through those pieces. And then I also, from that point, actually, appreciated the high level numbers that were in there, but really started to gravitate towards the list view, since that enabled me to see the actual transactions that had been happening and the company names and things like that, and helped me to kind of dig under the surface a little bit more.
Perfect. So you followed sort of this pattern, right? Prevention, private equity, venture capital, and then you went to the list view.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and when I was in the list view, then it was interesting and easy for me to then be able to see things that kind of popped up as surprises, and things that I maybe hadn't been aware of, or company names that I wasn't familiar with. So for example, I think one of the first transactions that kind of popped to my attention on this list was Mori. It's a company that I've seen in the news a bunch over the last few years, but I thought they were actually still relatively small, an earlier stage. And so to see their name pop up and see the size of the transaction that they had just participated in, definitely was something for me that kind of said, oh, maybe this is a company that I should definitely be paying more attention to. Might be a bit later stage than I had initially thought, and so would be something worth kind of digging into and understanding a little bit more about. Another example actually of how I was then kind of using this and some of the things that I was thinking about is Crisp is a company that I actually hadn't heard of. And so to see, that there was this transaction from a company I hadn't heard of, when I'm familiar with a lot of the companies in the space, and that it was a decent, deal size as well, definitely, raised my interest in it. And so wanted to kind of dig in and understand a little bit more about Crisp, what they were doing, whether it was something that would be of interest to learn more about.
That makes a lot of sense, Sarah. And so from here, what else would you like the tool to do?
If I were diligencing a specific company, I think one of the things that I would want to know is, how much funding has that company received? Who have they received that funding from? Some of the kind of high level stats and information like that in terms of background information.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to find an example for that, and I'll also take advantage of using our filter view, so everyone here can see how it works. We're going to pick on spoiler alert. So if we click into spoiler alert, you're able to get individual profiles for like that information that you're talking about, Sarah, like getting that deal information. If you scroll all the way to the bottom here, you'll see the table that has the individual deals, but also the funders that were involved in those transactions. And I guess the really nice thing that I love about like these profiles is that it marries the financial with the impact. Where solution providers have given us that impact, you're able to see it there.
That's great. Yeah, it's super awesome to see this kind of spotlight page for a company as well and see all of the information there. I think one of the other things that I was also interested in seeing as I was poking around with the tool is what are the funders that have been most active in funding food waste? I think, as ReFED was really kind of built on this idea of bringing the big tent together. And I'd love to see which funders are out there that could be potential thought partners or diligent sharers or co-investors as I'm looking at opportunities in the space. I think, while investors often do things on their own, in many cases, there's close partnerships for co-investment and sharing kind of processes along the way.
Perfect. So basically, I think there's a few ways you can do that. First, I think we've shown is the concentration chart. I think for the visual learner, I would say like it's a little harder to actually narrow in on it. I would honestly, for that perspective, go into the funders view in the list view. And so again, like I know I mentioned you can order by dollar deals involved in or deal count. I'm going to reorder by deal count. And so you can actually end up seeing the funders here that are most involved right now, at least on a deal count basis, for private investment into food waste.
Very cool. That's interesting to see SOSV at the top. I don't know. I know they do, fairly early stage activity, but I don't know that I would have thought of them necessarily as kind of one of the top players in this space. So that's very cool to see. Alejandro, thank you so much for just walking through kind of some of the thoughts that I had as I was looking through this tool. Congratulations again, just on the Capital Tracker launch, and I'm so looking forward to continuing to dig into this.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And so with that, I would like to introduce to everyone Emily Molina, who is the co-founder and president of Spoiler Alert, a technology company helping leading food, beverage, and consumer good brands manage excess inventory and digitize liquidation and discount sales. The Boston-based startup was born out of MIT in 2015 and is backed by leading food, tech, and supply chain investors. Emily, we were just talking about you and I guess your company.
That's right. Great to be here with you today, Alejandro. Looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. So first, I would like to ask you to share a bit more about how you could see yourself using the tool and how I guess you would say that it's useful for a solution provider.
Sure thing. First off, just want to say, as a data geek that's been working in the food waste space since the very early days of ReFED, it's incredible to see all of this coming together. From a founder perspective, I'd say this tracker would have been an incredible resource for us when we were first getting started and raising our initial funding. I'll note that this was right around that inflection point in 2016 that you were referencing earlier. But when we went out to raise capital, we had zero visibility into which investors were serious about food waste and which were actually allocating capital to companies like ours. We were essentially operating in the dark and having to educate a lot of investors on the opportunity in this realm and why they should be getting involved. I think this is a phenomenal resource for early stage founders that are looking to prospect into funds that are not just aware of the opportunity in food waste, but have relevant experience and portfolio companies, and therefore have a much higher likelihood of investing. As I think about our stage, we raised a Series A last year. As we go out for future rounds, this will be a super useful tool for us as well to understand the landscape of investors that are funding more mature companies, making investments at more of a growth stage along the lines of what Sarah was speaking to. And I guess, last but not least, I think as a founder, you're in some ways always fundraising. And I just want to point out that the fact that this tool exists will just benefit the broader ecosystem. We all know that money follows money, and this tracker shining a light on how much of an explosion of investment activity there is in this space will hopefully continue to attract a lot of new investors, bring them into the fold, and expand the pool of capital available to companies like ours.
I'm happy to hear that you found value in the tool. So let's dig into the points that you mentioned there. You mentioned insights into potential funders. How would you like to explore the tool in that regard? And I'm also going to share my screen so that people can see.
Yeah, well, let's fast forward, say that we're thinking ahead to our next round of funding. How would we find out which funders are the most active at our stage and at that next stage?
Perfect. Awesome. So I'll show that. And I guess this kind of worked out nicely with what Sarah was asking when it came to funders most active. So right now we're just in the list view. I'm going to be filtering, I'm assuming with the assumption that you're working on a Series B round. So a deal size would be, I would say, let's put that at roughly 30 million to 70 million for simplicity's sake. So that'll cover that $50 million deal size. I'm going to narrow it to venture capital, and I'll put in some private equity just in case there's some growth round or growth investors in there. And so when I apply that filter, you're going to end up seeing the investors that were involved in those deal sizes that are listed here.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, definitely something to keep in mind. I'd also be really interested to understand which funders have been most active in, say, the last 12 to 18 months. Really understanding who's committed to this space and continuing to make investments, especially considering the crazy environment that we've all been operating in the last couple of years.
Yeah, that makes sense. Definitely, like, most recent is going to be relevant. So I would actually go into the date range. And for simplicity's sake, let's adjust this to, you're saying 18 months. So I'll send it to about like the end of the beginning of last year. And so this will then update to show the investors that were involved then at this point. So there's a few companies that are listed out here.
Got it. Really helpful to see. And how could we dig into more information about funders, what investments they've made in the past?
Perfect. So I would say the way to do it.
Sorry to jump in. I think that your screen might be frozen.
Is it actually?
Maybe not share and then share again and see if that fixes it.
Let me see. Can everyone see this now? Wait, let me resume share. Can everyone see this?
Yeah, you're good now, Alejandro.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So Emily, now you can see this too. So you were asking the question of how to get more information about investors. So basically you could do similar to how we did it with solution providers. We have individual profiles. So if I click into Correlation Ventures, you're going to show the profiles show up. And what I think is actually really cool is, yes, we've got like higher level detail of like what's here. But again, like we list out the investments they've been involved in, all on an individual basis if you want further details. But if you don't want to spend a lot of time doing that, I think my recommendation is you can actually see us summarize that up here. So solutions related to food waste that they funded, you could see that Correlation has done meal kits, imperfect produce, and enhanced demand planning.
That's great. Super helpful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Emily. And so I would like to thank you for joining us today. And I'm looking forward to hearing feedback from you, and I guess Sarah as well, as to like any sort of improvements that we can make on the tool. And now I'd like to hand it off to Alex to close us out.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Alejandro, for walking us through the capital tracker. I believe a link to the tool is going into the chat box right now as we speak. So definitely check that out on your own. We're really excited to hear feedback from everyone. I want to thank our special guests as well, of course, Sarah and Emily. Truly appreciate your insights and loved hearing how the tool has been helpful and then how you think the tool can continue to be helpful going forward, given your individual needs as either a funder or a capital or a solution provider or whatever other type of stakeholder might benefit from this type of a tool. And thank you all for joining us today. A lot of you are on the call right now and couldn't be more grateful to share this with you all. Again, as Sarah reiterated, it has been in the works for a very long time, and we're really happy that this might provide value for all of you out there. We'll be sending out an email shortly with the link to this recording, so you can watch it again. It will have the link to the capital tracker as well. If you have any questions or feedback, reach us at insights@refed.org. And as I mentioned at the top of the call, we're actually going to be hosting dedicated office hours for the capital tracker. So if you've got a very specific question or you want to work through a strategy of your own, definitely check that out. I think we're also going to send a link in the chat right now. So click that if you can. And just before I wrap things up, if you can take a moment and fill out the poll that's on your screen, it's really helpful for us as we think about planning other webinars. Your feedback is always appreciated. And while you're doing that, I'll just let you know about an upcoming webinar that I bet some of you at least will be very interested in. It's actually tomorrow, but don't worry, there is still room and time to register. It's a very special pitch event that we're hosting again by the Food Waste Funder Circle. So tomorrow we actually have 3 food waste solutions that you can find their investment data in the food waste tracker, but they're going to be presenting their work tomorrow. That's Chapel Farms, which is building an end-to-end regenerative insect ag platform. We've got Clue, which is developing a small countertop food waste recycling appliance. And we've got Natsberry, which is hoping to fight consumer level food waste with its digital recipe book, which automatically converts weekly menus into grocery lists. So it should be highly valuable and a really quick 30-minute event. So highly encourage you all to join that. And we'll put that chat in the box right now. So with that, that's all we have for you today. Again, thank you all for joining us. Please stay safe and have a great rest of your day.